Welcome to episode 81 of the Headspace and Timing podcast, a show brought to you by the Change Your POV podcast network. Today, we're talking with Matthew Wetenkamp, a Marine Corps Scout sniper who went on to serve with the Wounded Warrior Project and is now the outreach manager with the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. Matt and I have a conversation about how we need to change how we think and talk about veteran mental health.
The entire veteran community, it's all mental health. That's all mental health. Mental health is not just sitting down and talking to you or talking to another clinician, or as I like to say, mental health is not just sitting down and talking to somebody with initials after their name. All these organizations out there that try to recreate that military community in civilian life, they're all doing mental health.
Welcome to the Change Your POV podcast network. You're listening to Headspace and Timing, a show dedicated to breaking down the stereotypes about veteran mental health. My name's Dwayne France, and I'm a combat veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. After I retired from the Army, I took on a new mission as a clinical mental health counselor for my fellow service members. If you served in any branch of the military, you're familiar with the M2 machine gun, the 50 cal. It's one of the most effective weapons in the military's arsenal. If the weapon's headspace and timing wasn't set right, however, it was just a huge useless chunk of metal. Veterans can be rendered inoperable if their headspace and timing isn't set correctly either. That's my goal with this show, to change the way that we think and talk about veteran mental health and reduce the stigma against seeking support. Each week, we'll talk with mental health professionals, veterans, and those who support veterans, service members, and their families. We're going to have real and honest conversations about a topic that most just don't like to talk about, veteran mental health. Let's jump into this week's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Headspace and Timing podcast once again, and as always, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen and learn more about veteran mental health. As you know, we often have clinicians coming on the show to help people understand more about the effectiveness of veteran mental health. And we also sometimes have veterans coming on the show to talk about their mental health journey. And once again, today's show is sort of a combination of the both. My guest today is a veteran himself, but also works with the Cohen Veterans Network, one of their newest clinics in Denver, Colorado. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Cohen, a little bit about peer support, and a little bit about how to overcome the barriers that exist in getting veterans into treatment. So my guest today is Matt Wetenkamp. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I know that we've been trying to do this. Our schedules have been competitively busy, but I'm glad we were finally able to get this off the ground. Before we get started about the work you're doing, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and sort of where you came from and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Background, I grew up in South Dakota, kind of normal upbringing, younger sibling, younger sister, family, parents still together, kind of a typical upbringing. I joined the Marine Corps in 2000. So I signed up during before my senior year in high school. September 11th of 2000 was actually my first day in the Marine Corps. So 9/11 happened on my 1-year anniversary. I was a scout sniper, deployed to Iraq with the initial invasion in 2003. Spent about 6 or 7 months there. Came back in September or so and got out about a year later. When I moved out to DC, spent a little bit of time working in the intel community, did a little traveling with that, and did that for a little while I was going to school. When I got back into school is kind of when I first got the kind of the draw to get back into the veteran world and get back into the military world. I started going to school with some fellow veterans and kind of getting plugged back into that community and talking about things and talking about the struggles faced by folks coming back, and decided I wanted to kind of get back into that world. Started working with Wounded Warrior Project out in the DC office back in 2012. Visiting Bethesda, visiting service members and their families on the inpatient ward as they were coming back off the battlefield injured, and trying to get them plugged into services there in the DC area. Moved out to Denver later on in 2013, still working with Wounded Warrior Project. So I transferred out to their office here in Colorado and spent a few years doing outreach for Wounded Warrior Project. And then a little over a year ago, moved over and started working with Cohen Veterans Network. Stood up the clinic here in Denver, the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, where we provide mental health services to veterans and their family members.
So it's interesting. You got out of the Marine Corps out after one tour, or after the combat deployment, but you said that you kind of went away from the military community for a little bit. I'm sure I've seen veterans that kind of do that, right? They're done with the military, they step away for a while. Was it intentional for you to distance yourself like that, or?
I don't think so. I don't think it was intentional. I had a lot of regrets about getting out and about not going back. I turned down the opportunity to go on another deployment, and I think that weighed really heavily on me. I know that weighed really heavily on me. I wasn't conscious at the time, but I think I felt a lot of shame and a lot of guilt for not doing that. And so I didn't really want to wear that title of veteran, of combat veteran. I didn't want to wave that flag proudly. So I don't think it was a conscious decision at the time, but I think, now, after reflecting on it and after some great mental health services that I've received, kind of unpacking some of that and kind of realizing the journey the last, 15 years took me on. That's definitely, it was, I separated myself, from the community for a reason, but, it sucked me back in and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be back in the community, and I have been for years now, and just glad to be able to continue to serve in a different way.
That's typically, and I see veterans when they'll distance themselves and then come back in because they feel like something had been missing, right? They feel like, we often talk about the camaraderie in our post-military lives is not the same as it was when we were in the military. Is that one of the things that you saw really kind of brought you back into the veteran community?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I mean, that was the first hook. Like I said, was getting connected with some. There was a couple of Marine Corps veterans who were in some classes with me at Georgetown, and just starting to chat with them, and just it was, getting sucked right back into that brotherhood, that connection, and feeling that bond. And it was, even though I had never met these guys before, it was like, of course, it was like I had always known them. They were brothers, and we start right back into the military lingo and sharing stories, and and then you realize that you miss that connection, and you miss that feeling of that camaraderie, and wanting to do more, wanting to get back in and figure out a way to serve again.
So your work with the Wounded Warrior Project was a lot more advocacy. Was it specifically mental health related, or is that something that emerged out of the work that you were doing?
No, I was on the outreach team with what Wounded Warrior Project calls the alumni program. So it was a lot of outreach, directly to, mostly to veterans and their family members, but some to kind of community partners and other VSOs and things like that. It was kind of almost like a combined outreach case manager kind of role. So it was like connecting with veterans and their families, hearing what's going on with them, hearing what they're struggling with, and kind of assessing what they might need, and then kind of playing the case manager role and getting them plugged into the right program and the right service, whether that was, one of Wounded Warrior Projects or one of our community partners, other VSOs in the community. And that's when you see the mental health need. Wounded Warrior Project, for all the great programs that they have, they didn't have any clinical programs. And that was the big struggle. That was a big struggle. That was one of the gaps, like we talk about. We always talk about the gaps in veteran programming. And it was, where do we connect veterans and their families when they're ready to receive mental health care, when they're ready to do it and they've decided, enough is enough. Where do we connect them to? And they're just, there aren't enough.
Right. I can definitely relate. My first career, my first job after I retired was with a homeless program. And we could do a lot of different things for veterans. We could get them jobs. We can get them dressed for success and, suits for interviews. And we could even get them housing. The one thing that we could not do was get them quick, effective, and appropriate mental health care. Many of these veterans, the only resources they had were the VA. Sometimes the VA was overwhelmed, and unless they were in a crisis state. And so seeing the same thing, having that gap, and really the mental health is an underlying aspect of all the other issues, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So you then transitioned into the Cohen Veterans Network, and for those listening, we did have Anthony Hassan of the Cohen Veterans Network back on episode 8, and Cohen Veterans Network is doing some really great stuff about trying to bring mental health to the veterans and their family members that need it. You're in a peer support and outreach role there as well, but it's more focused on mental health.
Yeah, we're a mental health clinic, and so my role is to go out and find the veterans and their families who need mental health care and talking about it. I mean, obviously that's a big part of what I do. It's not just as simple as finding the folks who need it. Oftentimes it's convincing them to seek the care and to receive it. And so I have been talking about how it works and what to look for and what you should expect and more so I think it's just about how to think about mental health care. We just think about it and we talk about it very differently than we talk about different kinds of healthcare. And so I really want to be that intermediary, that conduit between the veteran community and the mental health care and the mental health community, and kind of almost being a translator from sometimes, kind of talking to them about what it is and how it works and what to expect.
So when you say that we think about and talk about mental health care differently than we talk about physical health care, what kind of stuff do you mean?
From big and small, I mean, like little things that I've noticed, right? Almost like in any situation, like say in an office, right? And if I have to go to primary care, if I'm sick, like if I have the flu or my daughter has a rash, or you name it, a physical health ailment, we just say what doctor I'm going to see. Like I've got to go see my orthopedist, or I've got to go see I've got primary care or whatever it is. But if we have an appointment with our psychiatrist, we just say, well, I have an appointment, or I just need to take time off, or I need a couple hours off. We don't talk about why we're going. It's like there's something we need to hide, right? We can't talk about the fact that we're going to see a mental health practitioner. So just like from little things to that, and then I think the next thing that was a big one for me is it's about the expectation of recovery. We think about mental health care differently than physical health care in that, if you have an ailment physically, you go to a doctor because there are known treatments that fix that ailment. We've figured out how to fix broken legs at this point. So if you have a broken leg, you go to a doctor because there's known treatments that fix broken legs. Well, there's also known treatments that fix mental health ailments as well. And I think that's what people don't think of it like that. People think of mental health care as something that, once you're in for life. You got to have your weekly appointment with your psychologist every single week to talk about your problems and sit on the couch and grab a box of Kleenex and cry. And you're in it for life. This is something you're never going to get rid of. And it's just not true. These problems are fixable. And I think those are the two big ones for me. When we start talking about mental health care, we talk in vague terms and hushed tones, and we're embarrassed to admit that we're going to see that kind of doctor. And the other thing is just the expectation of recovery. People don't think of mental health care as something that you can recover from. So those are the big two for me, I think.
No, I really see that, especially with veterans that I work with. I was actually having a conversation the other day, and working with a veteran for a while, and things have really kind of gone well. And if honestly, if you're still seeing a therapist after 2.5, 3 years, then that therapist really isn't doing a very good job, right? We don't see physical therapy for 2.5 years, because if you see physical therapy for 2.5 years, that physical therapist is not doing their job. At some point, the whatever you're going to see physical therapy is healed. Of course, yes, there are chronic health conditions, but that's a great point, in that this isn't a long-term thing.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that does make mental health care a little bit different is that the way in which a mental health practitioner applies those treatments, applies those practices, it's not going to always work for everyone exactly the same. So that is the one difference in mental health care that can make it tricky for people, is they think all social workers, all psychiatrists, all psychologists, they're all the same. They all apply these. And so going to one is the same as going to any. And if I go to one and I go to 2 or 3 sessions and it's not working, well, it's just because this is all BS and it doesn't work. And I knew it. Why did I ever do this in the first place? I knew it was all BS. Well, no. The difference with mental health care is you do need to find that connection with somebody. You got to find that connection with somebody who can speak your language and help you unpack your own mind in a way that works. And just because it doesn't work doesn't mean that's a bad doctor. It's just you two aren't connecting. There is that one difference when it comes to mental health. It's like the brain's a tricky thing, and how we think and why we think the way we think is a tricky thing to unpack and figure out. And so you do have to find the person that you can connect with and speaks your language. It can help you unpack it in a way that makes sense to you.
That's a great point. If I think that my orthopedist is a jerk, I don't care as long as he sets my leg correctly, right? If I think my therapist is a jerk, it's simply not going to work very well. But
Right.
then the other point of you saying, when it's bad, and here we're talking about veterans, you and I specifically work with veterans. Veterans will generalize therapy, a bad experience, to all therapy. So I went to a therapy treatment and it was bad. That means therapy doesn't work, and they tell all of their buddies and friends, don't even bother because it's not effective. If it's good, it's specifically good. So I had a good experience. You should go to see this clinician. Only this clinician works. And so when it's a good experience, it doesn't generalize to all clinicians. It only applies to this one therapist, and that's the only one in the entire world that's any good.
Yeah, I had the exact problem. I mean, I'm one of those prototypical cases that you talk about. I finally got myself ready to see somebody, ready to talk. I've dug myself deep enough into this mental hole. I'm ready to seek care. I went somewhere. I went to a vet center, and I had an experience there that wasn't great. We didn't click. Me and my doctor didn't click. A couple of appointments, and it was a complete disaster. And then I didn't go back. I had that exact thought. I was like, I knew it. It's like everything everybody told me about mental health care, and specifically VA mental health care, like they were right. It's true. It's all BS. Like no wonder veterans refuse to go to the VA and the vet center. And it took me a long time to decide to give it a shot again. And I went to another doctor, and it was outside of the VA system, and he and I had a half a dozen sessions or so. And again, it was like, it just weren't clicking. He's not speaking my language. He's not hearing me. We're not making progress. And so then I went away again for a year or so. And again, and then I found another one. I decided to go back again and sought some referrals. I talked to psychologist who I knew, who was not my psychologist, but was a psychologist, but who knew me and knew a little bit about my personality. and asked for referrals and found one and went to see a third doctor, and we hit it off and we've clicked, and I've been seeing her for a while, and it's great. And she speaks my language, and she's helped me, unpack my mind in a way that is useful to me. Does that mean the first two that I went to were bad and were applying their trade, applying their trade in the wrong way? No, we just didn't click. And so, yeah, I mean, it was the prototypical case that you see all the time. And so many quit after that first one and say, yep, that was it. I'm not going to do it again. I knew it. Sometimes you got to try a second or a third one or however many until you find the person that works for you.
And I wonder if you don't see that the challenge is even exacerbated because it takes a long time just to get in the door in the first place. That just gearing up and you're sort of hesitant, and I've talked about how guys that'll kick down a door in Iraq won't kick down a door, won't come into it. They're afraid of what's on the inside of this door, but they were not the same way in Iraq or Afghanistan. That it's harder to come over this threshold, and so. Once you already have those preconceived notions of this might not work, and then you run into that first clinician, and then it just confirms what you believe, and then you're just out in the world for a couple of years until it gets bad enough to try again.
Yeah, I mean, that first experience I had, that bad one, that was 12 years after I got out of the Marines. So, yeah, it took 12 years to do it, and then when I finally did, it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. And so, I'm just glad that I didn't let that, convince me. It took me a little while to get back again. It took me a little while again to find the third one, but I'm glad that I didn't let that, convince me that all the things people had said about it was right.
So in what you were talking about earlier about the expectation of recovery and just believing that this is going to be effective, right? That I'm going to go in there and I'm going to talk to this person and I'm going to get some things out. I mean, that's not stigma. That's something totally different. Is just we don't believe in the effectiveness of mental health treatment. We think it's snake oil. We think it's voodoo. We think we're laying on the couch with a guy with glasses and a goatee. Even though I do have glasses and a goatee, but we don't talk about your mother unless your mother's, so there's this expectation, and especially veterans have that expectation that it's garbage and it's mumbo jumbo. How do you think we overcome that?
By talking about, by people like me and you and others like us, kind of being, proselytizing about it. I don't know how else to do it or how else to say it, but what I say all the time to people, people when I'm talking about it, I'm like, it works. You are not the best judge of what is going on in your own head most of the time, a lot of the time, especially with stuff like this that you're struggling with, depression, anxiety, PTSD, etc. All these catchphrases, these terms that we talk about, you are, even if you have the requisite, mental health education and degrees, it's still hard to self-assess. People with mental health degrees, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, they have their own psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers. Why? Because they're not the best judges of what's going on in their own head. And if you aren't that, if you don't have that education, that background, like, you're definitely not the best judge of assessing what's going on in your own head. So go to somebody who knows more about it than you do and can help you unpack what you're thinking and help explain to you why you're thinking what you're thinking, and help figure out why you're feeling what you're feeling, and change it and find a new way to look at yourself and look at your feelings and think about your thoughts and how you look at the world. There are professionals out there that know a heck of a lot more about the human brain and how we think than you do. It's just like the physical doctor, right? It's like, why don't you set your own broken bone and put yourself in a cast? Because you don't know how to do that. Why are you not giving yourself an ACL repair surgery? Aside from the anesthesia access, it's like, because you don't know how to do it. So you go to somebody who does, and they can help you figure it out. That's my big thing. It's like, you are not the best. Sorry, man. you are not the best judge of whether or not this is going to work, and whether or not what's going on in your head is fixable. So go to somebody who knows more about it than you do.
See, I don't wonder, though, if that goes into the fact that the instrument we're using to evaluate is the instrument that is being evaluated, right? It's like using a microscope to look at a microscope. We're using our brains to look at our brains and our minds and our emotion. We acknowledge the fact that I don't know how to set a broken bone or, cure a ruptured tendon or something like that. But there's, whether it's pop psychology or just general knowledge, but people do think, I have actually heard people say that they are more qualified to talk about mental health because they don't have a clinical mental health degree, because they experience it and they know what it's all about, and they don't need some fancy paper to talk about it.
Yeah. And as painful as it might be for that person to hear, the answer to the response to that is, sorry, but you're wrong. Like, you're just wrong. And you need to go to somebody to get your mind right.
So why do you think that these opportunities are out there? This is something that you and I have talked about, and obviously we've talked about at many different levels. The resources are out there. The Cohen Veterans Network, programs like my organization, a lot of different organizations that have been highlighted on this show. Clinicians are waiting for veterans to come in, but somehow we don't do a very good job at being able to communicate to veterans about the effectiveness of what we're doing. What's the disconnect?
I don't know. I think, I hope that just continuing to do things like this, to have these kinds of conversations, will slowly chip away at it. If you have enough people out there, this is the other thing. If you have enough people out there that will talk about their successes and how they got better, that helps. But because of the stigma, because we talk about mental health care differently than we do physical health, there's not as many people out, talking about the wins. If you had again, let's go to the physical thing, right? You blew out your ACL playing basketball, and then you have a buddy who blows out his ACL playing basketball. What are you going to tell him? You're going to tell him about your doctor who did an awesome job, and you're going to tell him about the things that did and didn't work for you during your recovery process, right? You're going to talk about the doctor. You're going to talk about the different things you did throughout the recovery, what worked and what didn't, the breakthroughs that you had, the points during the rehab process that you had those breakthroughs. You're going to talk about those sorts of things. You're going to guide your buddy through it, and as someone who's been through it, you're going to let him know what to expect and what to do and not to do, right? Is anybody having those conversations about mental health? I've never heard them. I don't hear them very often. And so I think it's got to be that. It's like, for those veterans who are out there who found a good therapist, who found a program or process or therapy that worked for them and helped them unpack whatever they were dealing with, and the lessons that they learned throughout the process, like, share those with your buddies. Like, share those with the community. Share your successes. Prove to the doubters that successes can be had and that healing can be had.
No, I like that. By keeping quiet about the successes, then we don't set that expectation of recovery, right? Even though I recover and things are going well, it's something that I don't want to talk about. There's still shame connected to the fact that there was depression or suicidal ideation, and so I don't talk about that, and that doesn't chip away at that expectation of forever mental health.
Absolutely.
And so this is sort of the way that we have to, I guess, communicate, right? Veterans, to be honest, right? Veterans aren't always going out seeking things about mental health. The speaking that you do, the blogs or the podcasts and outreach. There's still a barrier just trying to get them to even access that content. Is that all, do you think, still wrapped around into that, I've got this?
Well, and I think it's also, people don't, I think maybe I'm just speaking from me personally and thinking about my personal experiences. And so Maybe people can relate to this. Maybe this is common. I don't know. But I think, one thing's for me was not realizing that what I was thinking and what I was feeling and what I was struggling with was exactly the sort of thing that you go to receive mental health care for. I thought it was just like, this is just normal. This is just life. This is just something I've got to deal with. And this is just how people feel. And, maybe if I do this, maybe if I just like exercise a little bit more, maybe if I just tweak my diet a little bit, that's going to turn the dials in my brain and make things, better. And I think I had to realize that no, you're the prototypical case. Somebody out there listening, no, if you're struggling with any of these kinds of feelings, whatever we want to call it, depression or self-worth or motivation, just if you're not excited to get out of bed in the morning. Not everybody's excited to get out of bed every morning, right? But if every day is a drag and every day is feeling like, what the hell am I even doing here? No, that's exactly the sort of thing you should be going to see somebody for, because they can help with exactly that. That has a different feel than, again, not to keep beating a dead horse, but that has a different feel than a broken leg or the flu, right? The broken leg or the flu is something very clear that's off and is fixable, right? But just feeling unmotivated and down and that doesn't feel like something that has a clear fix to it. But it is that's exactly the sort of thing that can be fixed. And so I think that maybe has something to do with it too. But I just think these things are fixable and they're fixable in a shorter amount of time than you think. We talk at Cohen Veterans Network at our clinic, we do targeted treatment. So you come in and you tell us something that you want fixed. It's not just come in, sit down and start talking about all your problems and we'll, and you'll come in once a week for the rest of your life. And, that's, end of story. No, tell us what you want fixed. Insomnia, some nightmares, some feelings of depression or self-worth. You tell us what it is that's bothering you that you feel like is the biggest hurdle towards you living the life that you want to live. And we're going to target that. And in 12, 14, 16 sessions, so a few months, let's see if we can't fix that. I bet you we can. And I mean, that's it. And talking about it like that, thinking about it like that, let's target this symptom that you're sick of having to deal with every single day. And let's fix it. Let's get rid of it.
And so I think that that's the lack of awareness piece, right? We are not aware of the fact that that this is what we're dealing with, and that other people deal with it too. Again, that's that silence that if we keep it to ourselves, and the fact that we consistently wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning. If I don't start talking to you about that, which we're not going to talk about that at Buffalo Wild Wings or wherever, right? But if I do start talking to you about that, and you'll be like, wow, man, that was the same thing for me, and it doesn't become naturally understood. And so figuring out how to develop awareness in veterans that A, this is a natural reaction, and B, you don't have to live with it and suffer. Developing that awareness is critical before someone actually takes action to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is those little things, right? I think back to even just a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have to set my alarm for an hour to an hour and a half before I actually had to get up, because I knew that's how long it was going to take me to muster up the energy and the willpower to get my ass out of bed. I get up on my first alarm every morning now, and I'm fine and I'm ready to rock and roll and take on the day. Is every day awesome? Am I excited about it every day? No. But I think back to that difference in the last year and a half, there's two things that I credit that to, and it's yoga and a really good therapist, you know, and like these, and it's things like that. People don't think about something like that being the sort of thing that you would go to a therapist for, but it is. Like that's a problem with your brain, my friend. Like if you're having that problem, if you can't get yourself out of, if you can't muster up the willpower and the motivation to get out of bed in the morning, like that's a problem with your brain, and it's fixable.
And I think back to your story. Even at that point, you were fully engaged with the Wounded Warrior Project. You were serving as a case manager. You were helping other veterans. You know, you were taking care of their stuff and saying, "Look, dude, you know, go. I got it. You know, and go forward and do great things." While at the same time, silently or individually struggling with the fact that it was just hard to put the foot on the ground in the morning.
Yep, do as I say, not as I do. You know, for sure.
It is a challenge, yes, the physician heal yourself. And what you said earlier about, docs have docs. I couldn't do what I do if I didn't have somebody that I went to go see. I mean, it's just, it would not be possible for me to do it. The fact that I have 3 combat tours, 5 operational deployments overall, you don't come out of something like that without a scuffed knee and things that need to be fixed out of the cobwebs. And so there isn't anything wrong, and you're exactly right. It's easier for us to identify and support others in getting help rather than getting ourselves help.
Yep, always is.
And then something else you said earlier, Matt, was about being a translator, right? Taking what you understand works in mental health and being able to communicate that to the veterans that you're working with. Translation, though, works both ways, right? Taking what is familiar with the veterans and maybe communicating that to clinicians who may be less familiar with veteran culture, maybe don't even know what a scout sniper is or what that whole culture is. Do you find that that's something you do as well?
Absolutely. I, much to the perhaps frustration or annoyance of my clinical coworkers from time to time, I am the veteran, prototypical veteran in the office. Not to say I'm the only veteran in the office, but I've definitely played that role. I wear that hat. I've been trying to. I didn't ask you before we started if this is what rating this podcast has. So I've been trying to filter myself, but you know what? I'm the one dropping F-bombs in the office. I'm the one who's a little bit too loud and has to be told to tone it down sometimes. I'm the one who is maybe a little too unfiltered and says what they think and isn't afraid to push back and disagree and argue. It took some coworkers probably much of the last year to get used to me. But I think that's part of it. We're a different breed. The veteran culture, the veteran community, like we're a different breed, or we certainly can be. I don't want to paint all veterans with the same broad brush, but those stereotypes exist for a reason a lot of times, right? And so, that's a part of it is making sure that clinicians who are working with veterans get it and get the veteran and military community and get the struggles and are not going to be put off or turned off by veterans who talk about things that might shut down other therapists.
And you think that could be another reason why veterans won't access treatment, that if I can't deal with the worst day of my life and I'm going to go in and I'm going to see somebody, I've got this picture of a therapist in my mind, some young 24-year-old, guy or gal who has never lived life, sitting cross-legged on the floor burning incense. If I can't deal with this, they're definitely not going to be able to deal with this. And there's these stereotypes that veterans have about therapists that they're just like, I don't want to hurt you, therapy guy. I don't want you to deal with what I'm doing because I can barely deal with what I'm doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, I wouldn't want to put this on that first therapist I talked to, but I think that was part of it is, the things that I was talking about and the ways I was talking about it, set off alarm bells in her head. And then we never clicked, and we never were able to dig deeper, because it was just immediately like, she was on high alert, and we weren't ever to connect. Fast forward years until I found the one that I'm working with now. And I don't know if this is just who she is or she read me correctly, but when she starts dropping F-bombs in our first session, I was like, all right, we're good here. All right. Well, I found the right one. We're going to click. We'll be all right. And we have been, right? And so, I think that's part of it. It's a two-way street of understanding and doing that unpacking, for sure.
And so, and this is an element of where I think peer support can benefit, especially regarding veteran mental health, right? You are a veteran, a combat veteran who understands the veteran culture and have come to learn the benefits of mental health. And so you're able to sort of exist in both areas, right? Bridge that gap between the clinician and the veteran, because there's simply not enough clinicians like me in the field who are also veterans, much less combat veterans, and so on. How critical do you believe the role of peer support, specifically when it comes to veteran mental health? How critical is it?
Well, I think peer support is. There's two things that you just said that I want to kind of unpack or respond to. I think peer support is incredibly important to the veteran community, period. And you asked, is peer support important to veteran mental health? Well, all veteran services, all veteran peer support, the entire veteran community, like, it's all mental health. That's all mental health. Mental health is not just sitting down and talking to you or talking to another clinician, or as I like to say, mental health is not just sitting down and talking to somebody with initials after their name. All these organizations out there that try to recreate that military community in civilian life, they're all doing mental health. So organizations like the Mission Continues and Team Rubicon, who provide a way for veterans to continue to serve their communities, that's mental health. Like, they're a mental health organization that, all those veterans who needed to be able to give back and continue to serve, but got discharged from the military, or maybe separate, decided themselves to separate, but then missed it, that's improving their mental health. Organizations like Team RWB that provide the physical fitness and the camaraderie and the connection, to bridging that military civilian divide, like, that's mental health. All the organizations out there that do employment for veterans, that's mental health. Like, if you're unemployed, how mentally healthy can you be? If you're an organization that out there that helps veterans who have amputations or severe, physical disabilities find a new hobby and learn how to ski or get back out into nature and do hunting and fishing trips. Project Healing Waters. Like, is Project Healing Waters an outdoor recreation organization, or are they a mental health organization, right? So all these it's all mental health. Getting yourself plugged into something you love and finding passion about life and getting reconnected with the veteran community, or that's all mental health. And it's all peer support. Right? Even if you're just a fellow participant navigating these organizations and civilian life as a veteran together, that's peer support. And part of that, I think, has to be for those veterans out there who are doing these sorts of things, going on retreats and going on trips, or going on a deployment with Rubicon, or a community service project with the Mission Continues. If you've had successes in mental health care and you've gotten better by finding the right therapist and finding the right way to think about mental health care, share that. Talk about it. Those forums, when you're out there in the community doing things with your fellow veterans and you see somebody struggling, talk about it. Talk about your successes and what worked for you. And that's all a part of it. It's all mental health.
And so, and I think that's a very critical to understand, that if things are off, there is something out there for everybody. And not everybody is going to respond only to just Team Rubicon or Team RWB. But this is some of the sort of the new age VSOs or whatever we're calling them, the new organizations that they give veterans what the veteran needs, and not just but even things like the Travis Manion Foundation that supports building character. If you want to work with kids, Travis Manion Foundation is an excellent organization to start working with. Any kind of service to school, all of these different Student Veterans of America. There's something that's out there that can serve the veterans' need. While at the same time, if the need is greater than just that, there's a clinical aspect too. I'm not going to say that every veteran should come see a therapist to be able to get things set. Just like not everybody that has a broken, you could have stress fractures in your leg and you go see a physical therapist. You don't have to go to the full orthopedic surgeon, right? And so there's different levels, and I think that's where having someone like you who is tied into the veteran community, but also is convinced of the benefits of mental health, that can sort of help veterans navigate that kind of thing.
Yeah, and one thing I would say there, and I'm not sure exactly what I think about this. This is a new thing that I've started thinking about recently, a new idea, and maybe you can tell me what you think of it since you have the clinical background. But you said, not everybody needs to go see see a clinician, see a therapist. I actually wonder if that's not true. Like, we go see a primary care physician at least once a year. You're supposed to, right? Isn't everybody supposed to go see a doctor to get checked up, get your blood work done, make sure there's nothing going on behind the scenes that you don't know about? Like, why can't we go see a therapist once a year, twice a year, just for a checkup, just to make sure there's nothing festering behind the scenes that we don't know about or we don't realize? And there's not something there that could be fixed that we didn't even realize we were suffering from. Maybe we should go get a checkup with a therapist on a yearly basis, just like we go to primary care. I don't know. What do you think?
So I think that there are some things that it goes back to your idea of we're not fully aware of how deep what we're dealing with goes. As you know, and listeners know, that I work with veterans in the criminal justice system. But I've actually worked with veterans that the court will send them to me to evaluate that they think that things are going bad, but I'm looking at the assessments and I'm talking to them and said, no, things are going pretty good. And so sort of that initial checkup is to say, is there something here, right? It's, I've got this pain in my leg, doc, right? And so I think, yes, it could be beneficial for not the screenings that you and I took when we came back from deployment, because we didn't appropriately answer those. But something where we actually sit down as somebody that gives us a little bit of insight. It's that other point of view. I think that could be beneficial. I think what I mean is not every veteran needs therapy, right? Not every veteran needs to come in. And there's actually times where I'll say, you don't need therapy, so to speak, but if there's something you want to come in and you want to check, and we can come in periodically. And also it goes into that where you don't need them forever. After the course of treatment, again, my buddy Bennett Tanton, back in episode 39, he said he has a therapist that he hasn't seen in 2 years. But he knows that that's his therapist, and that if he calls back his therapist, he can get in to see him if he needed to, right? So I like the idea of making it as routine as going to see the dentist, which we also avoid, right? I'm at the point
where I would rather go see my therapist than the dentist at this point. That is much more palatable to me. For all you veterans out there who don't want to go see a therapist but are willing to go see a dentist, like, that's the wrong way. Like, therapy is much more palatable and much more enjoyable to me than the dentist at this point. So if you're willing to go see the dentist once or twice a year, you should be willing to go find a therapist.
But then that goes back to your idea of the expectations of recovery, right? Yeah, okay, he's going to, poke stuff in my mouth, but it's going to be over in an hour, right? And then I don't have to see him again for another 6 months. And so, for a lot, it's going to for a dentist, it's an endurance test, if I do it at all. But, for a therapist, I don't know what I have to endure. I'm concerned that, the pain so to speak, of the poking and prodding inside my brain is going to last longer than the poking and prodding inside my mouth.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. It's just people just have to realize, it's how your mind allows you to interact with the world, right? And physical pain is felt like through your brain, right? So even if it's the dentist or a broken bone or whatever, like that's still your brain and it's still your mind and how you interact with the world. Why do you want that physical pain gone? So that the noise of that physical pain in your brain can go away so that you can interact with the world in a healthy way that feels good. And like mental health is the same thing. Go to get that fixed so that the noise can go away so that you can interact with the world in a way that isn't clouded by just a different kind of pain.
Right. It's, it is not fun being angry all the time or anxious all the time or depressed all the time. It's, having these uncontrollable, significant emotions. It's not pleasant. We don't enjoy it. We might have enjoyed it when we deployed because that's what we did to survive, right? The anger was fuel when we were deployed in the appropriate environment. But now it's not fun walking around on pins and needles and being pissed off all the time. It impacts our life. And so those are some great points. So this is some good stuff, man. If people wanted to, let's say they're in Colorado, they wanted to connect and see what Cohen's going on, and maybe even talk about a little bit about Cohen is a nationwide network. How can people get connected with Cohen? And then how can people get connected with you specifically?
Just to give you a little bit about the Cohen Veterans Network, I'll give you the quick background. So for anybody who hasn't heard of it, well, you said you had Dr. Hassan on. I'm sure he gave a great background on it. But right now, Denver was the 8th clinic in the network to open. I think we're over 10 now across the country. We'll have 14 by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, and we'll have 25 clinics open by 2020. We're also able to, all of our services are available via what we say telehealth, right? It's care from anywhere. You can go and from all four corners of Colorado, and you can get dialed in just like we're doing now. Over Skype, you can talk to your therapist and get these issues fixed from anywhere. The hope is that in the years to come, with the network of clinics across the country, we'll be able to cover every county in the nation via telehealth. And so no matter where you are, you'll have access to a culturally competent clinician, understands military culture and veteran culture, and can help you unpack this. All these services are available not just to veterans, but their entire family as well. That's family as the veteran defines it. So in addition to blood and legal relatives, it could be a best friend or roommate. We really want to be able to strengthen the entire support network around the veteran. We can work with young children. We can work with couples, entire families. We can do it all. We can help. We're doing amazing work. I've seen it already. Had so many veterans who have come through our clinic and family members just saying thank you. Like this has made such a difference. It's changed our lives, and I know that's what's happening in all of these clinics all over the country. And so, if you're listening to this and you want to know if there's one nearby, just go to CohenVeteransNetwork.org and look for the clinic. If you're in Colorado, go to DenverCohenClinic.org. You'll find our clinic's website. You'll find information there. And I'm sure you'll have my full name on the podcast. Just look for my name. You can find me on Facebook. Connect with me. My info is on our clinic's website as well. My email address, I'll even give you that. We're all University of Colorado employees. So my email address is matthew.wetenkamp@ucdenver.edu. If you have any questions, you want to know about what to look for, what to ask about, how to think about this, if you just need to be convinced that it'll work and you should give it a shot, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about it. If anybody, the more people I can convince to give it a shot and try to unpack the mess that's going on in their brain like I was able to do, the world will be a better place. So please reach out.
No, that's great, man. I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to make sure that all those links are in the show notes. so people can get a hold of that if they'd like to. So thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime, my friend, anytime.
You're listening to Headspace and Timing on the Change Your POV Podcast Network. As always, a great conversation. Matt's just as fired up as I am about veterans accessing mental health services and is as vocal about his experience as anyone I know. What would it be like if more veterans talked about the benefits of treatment, as Matt did? I get it, this isn't something we talk about in public, but what's wrong with talking with your buddies about it? There are a couple of points that I'd like to bring home that came out of our conversation. Matt talked about an idea that you've heard often before. Why don't we talk about mental health the same way we do physical health? They're tied together and you can't have one without the other. When I was in the Army, we talked about the total soldier concept, the service member's potential, expertise, fitness, education, and included in there was attitude and judgment. Those are psychological concepts, cognitive ones. We can't succeed if we don't have our heads in the right place. Then there was Matt's assertion that all veteran support services have to do with mental health and wellness. This is also something that I believe. Mental health is not something we just bring out when everything goes wrong, but good mental health is foundational to success after the military. Often, we do everything but therapy and use therapy as a last resort, if at all. Instead, if a veteran were able to reach out and connect before things get into crisis, then life would be a whole lot easier for him. That's what I'm trying to do here on the Headspace and Timing podcast, let veterans, their families, and those who support them in the community understand more about mental health and wellness. If you want to keep up with all of our content, make sure to subscribe to the Headspace and Timing website by going to our homepage, veteranmentalhealth.com, and clicking on the orange button in the middle of the picture. And if you want to get this info in a different way, make sure to check out the latest Headspace and Timing book, Combat Vet Don't Mean Crazy, which can be found on Amazon. Next week, we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Carmen McLean from the National Center for PTSD. Dr. McLean is beginning a study that looks how veterans can access effective treatment through an internet-based program, perhaps as a way to overcome some of the barriers that Matt and I talk about in this episode. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and until then, stay focused and be well. I'd like to thank the Change Your POV Podcast Network for hosting this show and highlighting the critical importance of veteran mental health. We want to hear from you. You can reach out to me via email at dwayne@veteranmentalhealth.com. You can find me at Twitter @TheCounselingVet, or head on over to Facebook and look for the Change Your POV Squad. You can find the show notes for this episode and all the episodes by going to veteranmentalhealth.com or changeyourpov.com. Sign up for updates on either or both so you don't miss another episode. While you're at it, check out the other great shows on the Change Your POV Podcast Network. The show about remembering our military history and reviving our warrior spirit, Changing Hearts and Minds. The show about outdoor activities that us veterans love so much, Neophyte in the Woods. The show that helps us get going at the beginning of the week, Motivation Monday. And Attack Fridays, the show that brings you actionable tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge to help you make the best of your transition. While you're checking out the other shows, drop us a review in iTunes or whatever podcast platform you're listening to. The reviews really help spread the word about what we're doing. If you're looking for the total package for all the information you need to live the life you want after leaving the military, you found it. If you know of a buddy who's looking for the same info, share it with them so they can find it too. I want to thank Doc Todd for his permission to use his track, Not Alone, from his amazing album, Combat Medicine. Doc Todd is somebody who's trying to bring veteran mental health out of the darkness and into the light, and you can get the album by going to therealdoctodd.com. Check it out, because remember, veterans, you're not alone. Ever.
The struggle is real, found a feast and lost a soul. Eventually my drinking, it got out of control. There in darkness I roam, struggling to find home. See, suddenly death didn't feel so alone. 22 a day, destination unknown. It could have been avoided if you picked up the phone, but now you're gone, so I guess all we get is the tone. Nothing but bone weeds, overgrown, pushing up stones. I've triumphed over enemies, co-created mini-me's. Broke out facilities that tried to put an end to me. R.I.P. I'd rather grind in tranquility. Authentic tendency, embrace my ability.
I try so hard to have faith. I bow my head and I pray. Lord, please let me have strength to carry on and keep standing. How this life so demanding, so much pain, all this plenty. I hurt each time my way, but with you I'm not alone.
You're not alone.
That every time that I fall, I'ma call on you, get myself back up again.
Without my Georgia girls, yeah, I'd probably be dead. face, need a facelift, back to basics, vision LASIX. I only feel alive when I hear the bass kick.
Oh, I try so hard to have faith. I bow my head and I pray. Lord, please lend me the strength to carry on and keep standing. How this life so demanding, so much pain on this planet. I hurt each time I wait, but with you I'm not alone.
Not alone. You're not alone.
Oh yeah. And every time that I fall, I'ma call on you, pick myself back up again.
Yeah, just pick up the phone, you're not alone. Just pick up the phone, you're not alone, man. Just pick up the phone, you're not alone. Yeah, pick up the phone, I'm right here. And I love you guys. Take those bottles out, dog, and pour them in the sink. Take the needles out your arm and the gun away from your forehead. It's time, man, you've been through enough pain, stand up. It's time to stand back up. All my veterans, man, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Get up, you know.